The phone rang at exactly 2:45 a.m. I had been awake for hours, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The strange silence in our house seemed suffocating, and my thoughts were louder than the usual hum of the refrigerator. I had always been a light sleeper, but tonight, the restlessness inside me wouldn't let go. The call was unexpected. It wasn't my usual group of friends messaging me about some late-night chat, or a colleague asking for advice on a project. No, this was something different. I glanced at the screen. The name flashing on it made my stomach drop. It was her, Lena, my wife. My finger hovered over the screen for a long moment. I wasn't sure if I was ready to answer. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I ever wanted to talk to her again. But then again, there was always a small part of me that hoped for a breakthrough, some kind of reason to stay in this marriage. I swiped to accept the call. Her voice came through the speaker, sharp and clear, despite the late hour. Daniel, I need to talk. I could feel my heart tighten at her words. She had sounded so calm, so collected, but I could tell something was off. Now, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It wasn't even close to what I expected. A late-night call was never a good sign. Yes, she replied. I don't know what to say anymore. I need to tell you something. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Lena, it's late, what's going on? I tried to sound like I wasn't anxious, but I couldn't help myself. This had been building up for weeks now. The tension, the coldness between us, the unsaid words that weighed heavier each day. I knew something was coming. I just never expected it to be this. She let out a long sigh on the other end of the line. I don't even know how to say it, Daniel, but I've been thinking about us, about everything, and I think I've made a decision. I could feel my pulse quicken. A decision about what? I didn't even want to ask. I already knew. We had reached the breaking point in our marriage. But hearing it aloud, that was different. That was going to hit harder than anything else. About what comes next, Lena continued, her voice lower now. I'm leaving, Daniel. I can't keep doing this anymore. I can't keep pretending I'm happy. I froze. Her words stung more than I could have imagined. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. Lena was leaving? After everything we had been through together, she was just walking away? I blinked, trying to process what she had just said. What do you mean you're leaving? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. There was a long pause, a silence that stretched between us like a thick fog. And then I heard the faintest crack in her voice. I've been seeing someone else, she admitted softly. And I think it's time for me to move on. I don't want to hurt you, Daniel, but I think you've known this was coming. The words hit like a slap. You've been seeing someone else? I repeated, the disbelief evident in my voice. How long? Lena hesitated. I could feel the weight of her silence even through the phone. Finally, she spoke again, her voice trembling now. A few months. A few months. I whispered in shock. And you didn't tell me? She paused again before replying. I didn't know how to tell you, Daniel. I didn't want to hurt you, but I felt trapped. I haven't been myself for a long time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she could betray me like this, how she could stand there, on the other side of the phone, telling me this after everything we had built. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We had been married for 5 years. 5 years of trust, promises, and dreams. How had it all gone so wrong? But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't find the words to shout or accuse her. Instead, I just sat there in silence, the hurt and confusion choking me. I need you to understand, Lena's voice cut through the silence again. This isn't about you not being good enough. This is about me. I need to be free, and I need you to let me go. Free. Those words echoed in my mind. She needed to be free. It was like she had already made up her mind, like she had already moved on. And I was left here, holding the pieces of a shattered life. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to hold it together. I could feel the tears welling up, but I wasn't going to let them fall. I wasn't going to let her see how much this was destroying me. I understand. I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. I'll let you go. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, like I had swallowed something rotten. I couldn't believe I was saying this, but I knew it was the only thing left to do. She had made her choice, and now I had to live with it. Goodbye, Daniel, Lena said, her voice soft but final. And with that, she hung up. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, my mind racing. What had just happened? What was I supposed to do now? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The call replayed in my mind over and over again. I've been seeing someone else. The words echoed like a constant hum, mocking me. I had no idea who this person was, what they meant to her, or what they had that I didn't. All I knew was that it had been going on for months. Months. The sun didn't bring any comfort. The morning light filtered through the blinds, but it didn't feel warm. My apartment, which had once felt like a home, now felt like a prison. I wasn't even sure how to begin processing what had just happened. Lena, my wife, was leaving. She had found someone else. And I was left with nothing but the broken pieces of a life I thought I understood. I spent the whole day in a daze. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, ate breakfast, checked my emails, but nothing felt real. I felt like I was walking through someone else's life. It was as though I was watching a movie, but I couldn't change the ending. The part where she left. I didn't hear from her again that day. I knew it was coming. She had made her decision, and there was no going back. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something. There had to be more. There had to be some explanation, some reason that this was happening. Why hadn't I seen the signs? Was I that blind? That naive? I went through her things the next morning. Her closet, her drawers. There were no signs of a hasty exit. Her clothes were still in place. Her makeup still on the counter. I found a half-finished letter on her desk, one she had been writing before she left. The words were messy, like she couldn't find the right way to say goodbye. I didn't read it. I couldn't. It wasn't for me anymore. I felt like I had lost control of everything. It was one thing to hear her tell me she was leaving. It was another thing entirely to look at the remnants of our life together, scattered around me like broken glass. Too sharp to touch, too painful to clean up. That night, I found myself pacing around our apartment, wrestling with my thoughts. What was I supposed to do now? Should I just move on like she had? Should I try to get her back? There was a deep anger bubbling up inside me, but it was mixed with sadness, confusion, and, oddly, fear. Fear of what my life would look like without her. But then, just as I thought I was about to lose my mind, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lena. "We need to talk." The message hit me like a bucket of ice-cold water. I didn't know what she could possibly have left to say. What more was there to discuss? But then I realized I couldn't just ignore her. There was no way I could move forward without understanding exactly what had happened. I typed out a response, my fingers trembling. "Okay. When?" A few minutes passed before she replied. "I'll be over in an hour." I didn't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't prepared for the conversation that was about to unfold. I had convinced myself that I was ready to hear the truth, that I could handle it. But the moment she walked through that door, I realized how wrong I had been. Lena stood in the doorway, looking as composed as ever, but there was something different in her eyes. A weight I hadn't seen before. She had always been the strong one, the one who made decisions, the one who was sure of herself. But tonight, she seemed smaller somehow. The woman I had spent 5 years of my life with was standing in front of me, and yet, I didn't recognize her anymore. She stepped inside, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, suffocating. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I didn't know if I should ask her questions, or if I should let her explain things in her own way. I chose to say nothing, hoping that she would be the one to break the silence. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was shaky, a little more fragile than before. "Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you, but this is something I've needed for a long time. I didn't know how to tell you, but I couldn't keep pretending." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "You've been seeing him, haven't you?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Lena flinched, her eyes flicking down for just a moment before meeting mine again. "Yes," she said quietly, "but it's not as simple as that." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "How long has it been going on?" I asked, the words almost choking me. "A few months," she admitted, her gaze faltering. "It started as something small, something casual. But then it grew, and I realized I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to stop it. I didn't know what to say. The air around me felt thick, as though I was suffocating in it. She didn't want to stop? She had been sleeping with someone else for months, and now she was telling me she didn't want to stop? This wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't the woman who promised me forever. I shook my head, my mind racing. "And you couldn't tell me? You couldn't tell me this sooner?" The hurt in my voice was unmistakable, but I couldn't stop it. "I didn't know how. I didn't know how," she said, her voice breaking. "I was scared, Daniel. I was scared of losing you. but I was more scared of staying in a marriage that wasn't real anymore. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Everything we had built together, everything I had believed in, had been a lie. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or cry, but I did neither. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked the only question that had been burning in my mind since I'd heard the words I never thought I'd hear. Who is he? Lena didn't immediately answer my question. The room seemed to freeze, the air thick with the tension between us. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, as if it were trying to escape the cage of my ribs. Her silence stretched on longer than I was comfortable with. It was like she was trying to find the right words, or maybe she was trying to figure out how to make this sound less painful. But the truth was, no words could make this any less painful. I took a step closer to her, my eyes never leaving hers. Who is he, Lena? I repeated, my voice steadier this time. There was no point in pretending I wasn't dying to know. I had to know who this man was, the one who had stolen her attention, her affection, her love. I had to know what I was up against. She looked away for a moment, her eyes scanning the floor as if the answer was written somewhere in the hardwood. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. His name is Peter. I felt a sudden rush of blood to my head, as if I had been struck. Peter. The name meant nothing to me, but in that moment, it felt like the most powerful word in the world. Peter, I repeated, tasting the name on my tongue. And how long has this been going on, Lena? She hesitated before answering. About 6 months. It started casually, you know? A few texts here and there. A couple of late-night phone calls. Then it became more. He was someone I could talk to when I needed to escape. Someone who made me feel like I was important. Someone who wasn't you. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to shout at her for betraying me, for choosing him over me. But I couldn't. Instead, I stood there in silence, trying to process the truth that was unraveling before me. Peter wasn't just some random guy. He had become her escape, her confidant. He had filled the empty spaces in her life that I didn't even know existed. I clenched my fists, my knuckles white with the pressure. And you just kept seeing him? Behind my back? You never thought to tell me? To be honest with me? Lena's face flushed with shame. I didn't know how, Daniel. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it was just something I could handle on my own, that it wouldn't change anything between us. But it did. I couldn't stop it. And I didn't want to. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to know the reasons behind her betrayal. I didn't want to understand why she had chosen someone else over me. But here I was, listening to the woman I loved explain how she had fallen for another man. How did it happen, Lena? The words slipped out before I could stop them. How did you fall for him? She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with guilt and regret. It wasn't about falling for him in the way you think, she said softly. It was more about the fact that I felt seen. I felt like I mattered again. With you, Daniel, it felt like we were drifting apart. Like I wasn't enough for you anymore. You were always busy, always tired, always too wrapped up in your work. But with Peter, it was different. He listened to me. He cared. And that's when I realized I needed more. I felt the weight of her words, each one a reminder of how far we had drifted. I wasn't perfect. I had been wrapped up in my own world, consumed by my job, my responsibilities. I had neglected her in ways I couldn't even comprehend. But to hear her say it out loud, to hear her admit that she had looked elsewhere for something I hadn't even realized she was missing, it was like a dagger to my heart. Is that what it was all about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You needed more? You couldn't talk to me about it? You couldn't tell me what was missing? Lena shook her head. I didn't know how. I thought I could fix it myself. I thought if I kept going, everything would get better. But it didn't. And when I met Peter, I realized I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I took a step back, trying to process everything she had just said. It was like a fog had settled over me, clouding my judgment, clouding my ability to think clearly. I had loved this woman, trusted her, built a life with her. And now, it felt like it was all slipping away, like it had never been real to begin with. Why didn't you just leave, Lena? I asked, my voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? Why wait until now? Lena's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had once known. Because I was scared, Daniel. Scared of losing you. Scared of losing everything we had. But I was more scared of losing myself. I was falling apart inside, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain I was feeling. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, just wanted to hold her, to somehow fix this, to take all the broken pieces and put them back together. But I knew I couldn't. I knew it was too late. Are you in love with him? I asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Lena didn't answer immediately. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing the truth. Then, finally, she spoke. I don't know. I don't know what love is anymore, Daniel. I've lost sight of what it means. But I do know that with Peter, I felt alive again. And I don't think I can go back to the way things were. The finality of her words hit me like a tidal wave. She had made her choice. And it wasn't me. It was never going to be me again. I turned away from her, unable to look at her any longer. The pain was too much. I didn't know what to do next, didn't know how to move forward from here. I was drowning in this sea of confusion, and I didn't know how to swim. The days that followed that conversation felt like they were dragging me through a nightmare, each one blurring into the next. Lena was still in the apartment, but it felt like she wasn't really there. She'd been packing up her things little by little, not out of urgency, but because she had made her decision long ago. It was like I was living with a ghost, watching as she slowly faded from my life, piece by piece. I tried to act normal, like everything was fine, but nothing felt fine. There was a constant ache in my chest, a pain I couldn't escape. It was a feeling I wasn't used to, one I wasn't sure I could live with. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found Lena standing there, staring out the window. The light from the setting sun made her hair glow, and for a moment, I almost forgot about everything that had happened. She looked so much like the woman I had fallen in love with. But then the memories hit me. Memories of her telling me she had been seeing someone else. Memories of her admitting that she didn't love me the same way anymore. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say. My heart was still reeling from the words we had exchanged, but I knew we had to have one last conversation. We couldn't keep pretending like nothing was wrong. Not anymore. I think we need to talk, I said softly, stepping into the room. She didn't turn around. Her voice came, soft and distant, almost as if she were talking to herself rather than to me. What is there to talk about, Daniel? I've already made my decision. I can't stay here anymore. I felt a surge of anger rise up in me, but I swallowed it down. Yelling wouldn't change anything. I had to get to the truth, whatever it was, whatever was left of us, I needed to know. So that's it. Just like that? You've decided you want him, and you're done with me? Lena's shoulders tensed at my words, but she didn't turn to face me. It's not about him, Daniel. It's not that simple. It's about me, and what I've lost. What I've needed. I don't feel the same anymore. I don't feel like the person I used to be with you. I felt a lump form in my throat. So, you're telling me I wasn't enough for you? The question slipped out before I could stop it, and as soon as it left my lips, I regretted it. She didn't respond right away, but I could see the tension in her posture, the way her hands clenched at her sides. I never said you weren't enough, Daniel, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I just don't think I am the same person I was when we got married. You were everything to me back then, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And so did you. Her words stung, but there was a truth in them I couldn't ignore. I had spent so much of my time wrapped up in work, in the routine of our life, that I hadn't noticed how distant we had become. I hadn't noticed that she was fading away, piece by piece, until it was too late. You never told me you were unhappy, I said, the hurt creeping into my voice. You never gave me a chance to fix it. We could have talked about it, Lena. She finally turned to face me, her eyes soft but weary. I didn't know how, and by the time I realized what I needed, I was too far gone. I didn't think you'd understand, Daniel. I didn't think you could. You were so focused on everything else. I felt invisible. I felt a pang of guilt strike deep within me. I had been so caught up in my own life that I hadn't seen the signs. She was right. I had taken her for granted, assumed that everything would be fine without putting in the effort to really see her. I had failed her in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Do you love him? I asked, barely above a whisper. I needed to know. I needed to understand if there was any part of her that still loved me, or if it was all just gone. She hesitated, the silence between us stretching on longer than I could bear. I don't know, she finally said. I care about him, yes. But this isn't just about him. This is about me, Daniel. I needed to find myself again. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. And I don't think you can either. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand that she stay, to beg her to fix this with me. But I knew better. I knew that if she had already made up her mind, there was nothing I could say to change it. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of her words, the finality of them, seemed to lift something off my chest. It wasn't relief, exactly, but it was a moment of clarity, a brief moment of understanding that I couldn't keep holding on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Lena looked at me for a long time before she spoke, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm leaving, Daniel. I need to do this for myself. I need to figure out who I am without you, without us." I nodded slowly, my heart heavy but resigned. "I understand," I said, even though I didn't. I didn't understand any of this. But I understood that she needed to go. She needed to find herself, and maybe I did, too. Lena reached for her bag, her hand trembling just slightly. "I'm sorry. I really am. I never wanted to hurt you. But I think you know this is what I need." I didn't say anything as she walked toward the door. My mind was still spinning, trying to process everything she had said. I wasn't sure if I was angry, sad, or numb. All I knew was that my life was never going to be the same again. As the door clicked shut behind her, I stood there in the silence, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. She was gone, and I was left here, alone, trying to figure out how to move forward from a place I didn't recognize. The days after Lena left were the longest of my life. The apartment that once felt like a home now felt like a cold, lifeless shell. I couldn't escape the emptiness. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her, small things, like her perfume bottle on the bathroom counter, or her favorite book left open on the coffee table. It was as if she had left an imprint on everything around me, a constant reminder of the woman I had lost. The silence was suffocating, and no matter how hard I tried to fill it, nothing seemed to work. I went through the motions of everyday life, but it felt like I was on autopilot. I went to work, sat in meetings, and spoke to friends, but none of it felt real. I had become a ghost of my former self, going through the motions without any purpose. I kept telling myself I was fine, that I would get over this, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I wasn't fine. I was broken. It wasn't until a week later that the next bombshell hit. I was scrolling through my phone, absent-mindedly checking emails, and trying to distract myself from the thoughts that kept creeping in when something caught my eye, a message from Lena. At first, I froze. I hadn't heard from her since she left. My heart skipped a beat as I tapped the message open, not sure what to expect. "Daniel, I need to talk to you. Can we meet? There's something I haven't told you." The message was short and to the point, but the words sent a shiver down my spine. What more could she possibly have to say? Hadn't she already said everything? I had so many questions swirling in my mind, but most of all, I was angry. Angry at her for leaving, angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. But curiosity got the better of me. I needed answers, even if they were answers I wasn't ready to hear. I agreed to meet her the next day, at a small cafe we used to go to on weekends. The same cafe where we had shared so many moments, laughing over coffee and discussing our future. I hadn't been there since she left, and the thought of returning felt like reopening an old wound. The next morning, I arrived early. I wanted to prepare myself, to steel myself for whatever was coming. I didn't know if I was ready to face her, but I couldn't avoid it any longer. I needed closure, even if I didn't know what that would look like. Lena showed up a few minutes later, looking different somehow. She was dressed in a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in a way that was both effortless and elegant. She looked like the woman I had married, the woman I had loved. But there was a coldness in her eyes, a distance that hadn't been there before. She wasn't the same, and neither was I. She sat down across from me, her eyes avoiding mine for a moment before they finally met. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she began, her voice softer than I remembered. "I know this is hard, and I know I've hurt you, but I need to explain something." I didn't speak. I couldn't. There was too much anger in me, too much hurt. But I needed to hear what she had to say, no matter how much it tore me apart. She took a deep breath before continuing, her hands trembling slightly. "I wasn't honest with you before," she said, her voice faltering for the first time. "There's something I need to tell you about Peter. Something you don't know." My pulse quickened at the mention of his name. Peter, the man who had taken her away from me, the one who had caused all of this. I felt a surge of jealousy and rage flood through me, but I fought to keep it in check. What do you mean? I asked, my voice sharp, barely controlled. Lena hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. It's not just that I was seeing him, she said, her eyes filling with tears. It's that I never told you the truth about him. About us. He wasn't just some guy I met. I thought I could keep it casual. But the truth is, Daniel, I was falling in love with him. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't breathe. I had known this was coming in the back of my mind, but hearing it aloud, hearing her say it, was another thing entirely. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I tried to fight it, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to ignore what I was feeling, but it got stronger every day. I couldn't deny it anymore. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. So you were in love with him all along? I asked, my voice shaking with anger and pain. Lena nodded, her face pale. Yes, and that's why I left. I couldn't keep lying to you, to myself. I had to choose, Daniel. I had to be honest with myself. And Peter, he made me feel alive in ways I couldn't explain. I thought it was something I could control, but it wasn't. I fell for him, and I couldn't stop it. The room seemed to spin as I absorbed her words. I had never imagined this. Never imagined that the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, could fall in love with someone else while she was still married to me. It was like everything I had believed about us had been a lie. Lena reached across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to touch mine. But I pulled away, the hurt too much to bear. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted to cause you this pain. But I couldn't live a lie anymore. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. She wasn't the same woman I had married. She wasn't the woman I had thought I knew. And that hurt more than anything. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this, Lena, I said, my voice cold, my throat tight. I can't keep listening to you tell me how sorry you are. You've made your choice. And I'm not it. I turned and walked out of the cafe, not looking back. There was nothing left to say. The next few days blurred together in a haze of confusion and anger. I avoided the apartment as much as I could. There was no escaping the emptiness there, the ghost of a life I once thought was perfect. Every room I entered felt suffocating, filled with reminders of Lena. Her favorite coffee mug still sitting on the counter, the scarf she left on the chair, the books she used to read late at night. But even worse than the objects she left behind was the thought of her with Peter. It haunted me. How long had she been in love with him? Had she been planning this the whole time, or had it just happened? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. My concentration was shot. Every thought seemed to drift back to Lena. The conversation we had at the cafe played on a loop in my head. Her admission that she had fallen in love with Peter, it wasn't just painful, it was a wound that I didn't know how to heal. I decided to go for a walk, anything to clear my head. The city was bustling around me, people moving in and out of stores, taxis honking in the street, the usual noise that used to comfort me. But now, it felt like white noise, distant and irrelevant. I didn't care about anything anymore. I wanted answers. I needed closure, something to make sense of this entire mess. As I walked, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw it was a message from Lena. Daniel, please, I need to talk to you. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but there's something you need to know. Please, just hear me out. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to tell her to go to hell. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, needed to know what she was about to say. Maybe there was something more. Maybe this wasn't as simple as she had made it sound. Maybe there was still a chance for us to figure this out, even if I didn't know how. I typed out a quick response, my fingers shaking slightly. Fine, but this is the last time. We meet at the park at 3 p.m. I didn't wait for her reply. I just kept walking, my mind racing with 100 thoughts I couldn't control. What else could she possibly have to say? The pain in my chest hadn't dulled, but I was becoming numb to it. It was starting to feel like this was my life now. Pain, confusion, and Lena. At exactly 3 p.m., I arrived at the park. It was one of those crisp autumn days when the leaves were beginning to turn orange and red, the air fresh and cool, but it did nothing to ease the weight on my shoulders. I sat on a bench near the fountain, staring into the water, my thoughts scattered. I wasn't even sure if I was doing the right thing by agreeing to meet her. But I had to know. Lena showed up right on time, but she didn't look like the woman I remembered. She was dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, her eyes tired, her face pale. She wasn't glowing like she had been when we first met. There was no excitement in her. There was only exhaustion and regret. She sat down next to me, but there was no warmth in her movements, no easy familiarity. It felt like we were strangers. "I don't know how to make this right," she began, her voice trembling. "I know you're angry, and I don't blame you, but I need you to understand something." I didn't respond. I just looked at her, waiting for her to continue, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She took a deep breath, then looked me straight in the eyes. I wasn't just falling in love with Peter. I was running away from something, Daniel, from myself. I didn't know how to face the truth about our marriage, about the way I had been living my life. I was so caught up in my own confusion that I didn't realize what I was doing to you, to us. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was faint, like a candle about to be snuffed out by a gust of wind. "What do you mean, you were running away?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lena's hands shook as she held onto the edge of the bench, her gaze fixed on the ground. "I didn't know who I was anymore, Daniel. I didn't know if I was the woman I used to be, or if I was just someone trying to please everyone else. You and I, we got lost in our own lives. You were always working, always distracted. And I was pretending everything was okay, when it wasn't. And then I met Peter. He made me feel seen, Daniel. He made me feel like I mattered again. And I got caught up in that. I felt my chest tighten, and for a moment, I didn't know if I could breathe. So what? You think I didn't see you? That I didn't care?" I snapped, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Lena flinched at the sharpness in my tone, but she didn't back down. "No, Daniel, that's not what I'm saying. But I stopped seeing you. I stopped seeing us. I was so focused on my own pain, on my own loneliness, that I didn't realize how much we were both hurting. I needed something, anything, to feel alive again. And I thought I found it in him." There was a long silence between us, and I could feel the weight of everything she had said pressing down on me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that she had been drowning in her own life, and I hadn't even noticed. We had both been too caught up in our own worlds to see how far apart we had become. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. But I need you to understand that this wasn't just about Peter. It was about me finding myself again, about figuring out who I am. And I know that's selfish, but I had to make a choice." I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know how to respond to her apology, to her confession. All I knew was that we were standing at the edge of something, and I had no idea if we could cross it together. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The air between Lena and I felt thick with unspoken words. The park, with its rustling leaves and distant chatter of people, felt strangely distant, like we were in our own world. She was sitting beside me, but there was still a wide gap between us, a chasm of hurt and confusion that seemed impossible to bridge. I had spent so many nights thinking about this moment, imagining what I would say to her when she finally came back to face me. And yet, now that it was here, I had no words. My mind was still reeling from everything she had told me. The shock of her confession, the fact that she had fallen in love with Peter, the stranger who had replaced me, had left me numb. How was I supposed to process that? How was I supposed to make sense of all this? Lena's hands fidgeted in her lap, her eyes downcast. She wasn't crying, but I could see the weight of guilt pressing on her shoulders. For a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. She was just as broken as I was. She had made choices, and now she was living with the consequences. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the pain I felt. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay. "I don't know what to say to you anymore, Lena," I said, my voice hoarse, raw. "You've shattered everything I believed in. I trusted you. I loved you. And now I feel like I've been living a lie." Her face tightened, and she reached out, her fingers trembling as she placed them lightly on mine. "I know," she whispered. "I know. And I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But I've been hurting, too. I've been lost for so long, Daniel. I didn't know who I was anymore. And when I met Peter, I felt seen, for the first time in so long." I pulled my hand back, the sharp sting of her touch still fresh. "So what now, Lena? You just want me to forgive you?" Pretend like everything is fine and move on. Is that it? She shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. No, Daniel. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I'm telling you the truth now because I owe you that much. You deserve the truth. The truth. I felt the weight of that word, the finality of it. It was like I had been living in a fog for so long, trying to hold on to something that wasn't real. And now, Lena was finally tearing that fog away, revealing everything in its stark, painful clarity. She had made a choice. And now, I had to make mine. I stood up suddenly, my legs shaky beneath me. The bench where we had been sitting felt too small, too cramped. I needed space. I needed air. I can't do this, I muttered, more to myself than to her. I need to think. I can't keep talking in circles. You've told me everything, Lena, but I don't know how to move forward from here. She stood up as well, her voice breaking as she reached for me, but I took a step back. Please, she said, her voice barely audible. Please don't walk away from me. I can't lose you, Daniel. Not like this. I wanted to turn around and walk away, to never look back at her again. But something in her voice, the desperation, the rawness, stopped me. I turned around slowly, my eyes meeting hers. You've already lost me, Lena. You made your choice, and I'm not part of it anymore. Her face crumpled, and I saw the tears start to fall. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I never wanted to lose you, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I can. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted either. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand that she choose me, that she fix the mess she had made. But another part of me knew that the person I was before Peter, before everything, wasn't the person standing in front of her now. I had changed. I wasn't the same man who could forgive and forget. I wasn't the same man who could accept her betrayal. For a long moment, there was silence. We stood there, looking at each other, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. Finally, I spoke. I need space, Lena. I need time to figure out what I want, what I need. But I can't be here with you right now. Her eyes filled with tears, and I saw the hurt in them. But it was a different kind of hurt. The kind that wasn't just about her choices, but about the reality of what we had become. We weren't the people we used to be. And no matter how much we both wanted to fix things, the damage had been done. I understand, she said softly, her voice breaking. I'll go. I didn't want her to go, not really. I didn't want to be alone. But I knew it was the only choice left. I turned away from her then, my back to her, as I started to walk away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. As I walked away, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. I had no idea what the future held. But one thing was clear, I had to move on. I had to figure out who I was without her, without this life we had built together. I didn't know where to start, but I knew that I couldn't keep holding on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. The days that followed felt like an eternity. The initial rush of anger, betrayal, and hurt slowly began to fade, replaced by a quiet ache deep within me. I didn't know where I was heading, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what had been, or what I thought we were. Lena had made her choice, and I had to make mine. I spent weeks in a blur, trying to find something that felt real again. I took long walks, letting the city become my escape. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected over the years. I even picked up an old hobby I had once loved, painting. It wasn't much, but it gave me an outlet, something that made me feel alive again. Slowly but surely, I started to remember who I was before all of this, before the hurt, before the confusion. It was like peeling away layers of someone I had forgotten, and I realized that I had been holding onto a version of myself that no longer existed. One evening, a few months after Lena left, I was sitting in the same cafe where we had met that day. It was a quiet, peaceful evening, and I was sipping my coffee, staring out the window at the world going by. The weight of the past still lingered in the back of my mind, but it didn't feel like it was dragging me down anymore. It was just part of the landscape now, something I had learned to live with. And then, as if the universe had a strange sense of timing, she walked in. Lena. I wasn't sure how I felt seeing her again. Part of me wanted to run, to avoid the emotions that would inevitably surface. But another part of me, one that had finally come to terms with everything, was curious. She was different, too. Not the same woman who had walked out on me months ago. She seemed quieter, more grounded. She didn't look like she was trying to be someone she wasn't. She spotted me almost immediately, her eyes locking with mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. It was like we were both waiting for something. Maybe an apology, maybe an answer, or maybe just the recognition that things had changed. But what came next was simple, and it was all we needed. She smiled softly, and I returned it, the tension between us easing for the first time in what felt like forever. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice light. "Can I join you?" I nodded. "Of course." She sat down across from me, and for the first time, we didn't need to fill the silence with explanations or apologies. There was no bitterness, no regret. Just two people sitting together, acknowledging the past, but not being defined by it. "How are you?" she asked after a long pause. "Really, how are you?" I thought about it for a moment, the question catching me off guard. How was I? I could have said I was angry, hurt, still lost in the mess she had left behind. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, a genuine, calm smile. "I'm good," I said, surprised at how easy it was to say. "I'm really good." She smiled too, a soft, relieved smile. "I'm glad. I think we've both come a long way." I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. We had both taken the long road, the hard road. But we had found our own ways to heal, to move forward. And that was the first step towards something new. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, her voice quieter now. "I wish things could have been different, that I could have seen everything sooner." I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers, the gesture simple and honest. "It wasn't meant to be, Lena. But that doesn't mean it was all for nothing." Her eyes softened. "No, it wasn't," she whispered. We sat there for a long while, just talking about life, about where we were now. It wasn't the same as before, but it didn't need to be. The truth was, I had learned to forgive her, not because she asked for it, but because I realized that holding on to the anger and the hurt was only holding me back. I had learned that closure didn't come from her. It came from within me. As we parted ways that evening, there were no promises, no regrets, just an understanding. We had both changed. We had both grown. And while we weren't the same people we had been when we first met, we were both okay with that. I left the cafe feeling lighter, not because of Lena's presence or the conversation we had, but because I had finally let go. I had let go of the past, of the pain, and of the expectation that things could go back to the way they were. I had learned to live for myself again, to embrace the uncertainty of the future with an open heart. And that, I realized, was the most important thing of all. The sun had set, and the city felt alive, full of possibilities. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with not knowing. And that was enough. The end.